Good morning, everyone. As always, place your cross on first. No matter what's going on in your life, people. I feel God put a story in my head to tell about today. The story between David and Michal. But before I get started, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. But as I was saying, I was talking about the story between Michal and David. If anybody know anything about that, Michal was the daughter of Saul. But reading can get you the story better than me telling it to you. Let's start off with 1 Samuel chapter 18. And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking to Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and his girdle. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set over the man of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And it came to pass, as they came when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of all cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments and music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. Now think about that. Now if you know the backstory, Saul was being disobedient to God. He wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. So God decided he said, I found a man after my own heart who's going to listen to me, who's going to follow me. And he replaced Saul with David. He anointed David to be king of Israel. And when that happened, an evil spirit started vexing Saul. And he started hating David. It's like his heart knew that this is my replacement. So Saul set out to devise a wicked plan to try to destroy David. And it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house of David, and David played with his hand, and as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David, even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. And Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, and was departed from Saul. Let me go back for a second, people. Now you remember the story I just read? The women were dancing and singing. They was paying homage to both of them. But Saul was jealous. Remember that part. Therefore Saul removed him from him, and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways. And the Lord was with him. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. And all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. It's kind of weird that people would hate you because of you doing well. People do. Because you're doing good, and especially if you're favored by God. Your enemies will hate you. And Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said unto Saul, Who am I, And what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, and she was given it to Adriel, the Maholathite, to wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Now think about it. Remember, look what they said. She loved David. And Saul said, I would give him her, that she may be a snare to him. Remember that part too. And that the hands of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law, and the one of the twain. And Saul commanded the servants, saying, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king have delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servant spake those words in the ears of David, and David said, Seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man, and lightly esteemed. And the servants of Saul told him, saying, On this manner spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall you say to David, The king desireth not any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. That sounds familiar. Somebody else had to do something like that. Samson had to get some tunics in regards to his wife. And you remember the story with Samson's wife, to-be wife. She lied. She told the riddle, and he was like, you wouldn't have plowed my heifer, you would have never figured this out. But he still loved her, right? But that iniquity that she did in regards to her husband returned upon her own head. She loved him. But when it came to, we're going to kill you, she betrayed him. And a lot of people in your life will betray you for different reasons, but one of the main reasons people betray one another is jealousy. You understand? And the servants of Saul told him, saying, On this manner spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall you say to David, The king desireth not any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. And the days were not expired. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men. And David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full tale to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, to wife. So what happens when you become a king? You become almost a prince. Look at the rise of David, from slaying Goliath, from being a poor shepherd boy to fighting in the army for Saul, and doing all these wonderful things for Saul. Now, that's the thing I don't get about the story of Saul, but I do understand it. David did not mean Saul any harm at all. He was just favored by the Lord, and the Lord had a plan for him, and Saul, being rejected by God, couldn't stand it. And he was trying to find any way to ensnare and trap David. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the prince of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, that his name was much set by. Chapter 19. And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son, and to all his servants, that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, seeketh to kill thee. Now therefore I pray thee, take heed to thyself until the morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where thou art, and I will commune with my father of thee. And what I see, that will I tell thee. Look at that. The enemy's son was on his side. And Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father, and said unto him, Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been The word, very good. Jealousy had clouded his mind by then. For he did put his life in his hand, and slew the Philistines, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all Israel. Thou sawest it, and didst rejoice. Wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood, to slay David without a cause? What he said? What the Bible say? To be angry to hate a man without a cause is sin. And Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul sware, as the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. Saul did this so many times. Then he'll change his mind and hate David again. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan showed him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. And there was war again. And David went out and fought with the Philistines and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled from him. And the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, as he had sat in his house with his javelin in his hand, and David played with his hand. And Saul sought to smite David, even to the wall with the javelin. But he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Saul also sent messengers into David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, If thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal gave David a heads up. She loved David. So Michal let David down through a window. People always getting let down through a window in the Bible. Paul, the spies. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, and put a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster, and covered it with a cloth. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, He is sick. And Saul sent the messenger again to see David, saying, Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may slay him. And when the messengers were come in, behold, there was an image in the bed with a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster. And Saul said unto Michal, Why hast thou deceived me so, and sent away my enemy, that he has escaped? And Michal answered Saul, He said unto me, Let me go. Why should I kill thee? So David fled and escaped, and came to Samuel to Ramah, and told him all that Saul had done to him. And Samuel went and dwelt in Naioth. Long story short. Now, right at this time, it seems like Michal is for David. Now, she just loves him. She cares about him. She want to look out for him. But the story changes. Let's go over to Second Samuel. Let's see what's up. Let's see what happens. 2 Samuel. Now, David had fled from Saul, and he was running through the wood, everywhere. Saul was trying to kill him, and he just kept slipping out of Saul's hands. And during this time period, Saul had took David's wife, Michal, and gave her to somebody else. But when David became king, or when David came back and became king, he wanted his wife back. And after 2 Samuel chapter 3, starting with verse 12. And now they sent messages to David on his behalf, saying, Who is there in the land? Saying, Also make thy league with me, and behold, my hand shall be with thee, to bring about all Israel to thee. And he said, Well, I will make a league with thee. The one thing I require of thee is, now think about it, out of all this time running, Michal was still on his mind. Thou shalt not see my face, except thou first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when thou comest to see my face. Look at it, he wanted to bless her with him. He was like, Don't get her, man, God, I ain't get her back. And David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, Deliver my wife, Michal, which I espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, and Abram from Philithil, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her along weeping behind her to Bahurim. Then said Abner to him, Go return. And he returned. So David got his wife back. But she had been given to another. But the thing is, David was already married to her. Saul did this out of spite with David. But she had fell in love with this new guy. But in reality, it wasn't a new guy's wife. It was David's wife. That's why you got to really be careful, people, out here. Now, it seems like this would be a happy ending. Like, she finally come back. He got his wife back. Everything's going to go well. But no. It might be a general curse thing going on over here. If you really pay attention. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 6. Starting with verse 17. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in this place. This is when David finally get the ark back. And they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in this place in the midst of the tabernacle. And David had pitched for it. And David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And as soon as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he dealt among all the people, even among the whole multitude of Israel, as well to the women as men, to everyone a cake and bread, and a good piece of flesh, and a flagon of wine. So all the people departed, everyone to his house. But let me go back to chapter 6, verse 12. And it was told King David, the Lord have blessed the house of Obededom and all that pertaineth unto him, because the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obededom to the city of David with gladness. And it was so that when they that bare the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. Sound familiar? Does that sound familiar at all? Let's go back. Does that sound familiar? Let's go back to chapter 18. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 5. And David went out whatsoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely, and Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And it came to pass, as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul, with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000, and to me they have ascribed but 1,000. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. Now think about that. That sounds familiar. Like father, like daughter. Here comes some of her ideas. David dancing again. The people are dancing with David, David dancing. And now, here it is. After he done chased this woman down, brought her back to his house to be his wife. Now she wants to be jealous. And she despised him in her heart. Look at that generational curse. He said, all things work to the good of those that love God, who are called according to his purpose. But then the Bible says, touch my anointed and do my prophets no harm. Most people think physical harm. It's the only way you can touch God's anointed. But jealousy, hatred towards them can do the same thing. Right? Let me pause for a second. I will continue.